In a quiet town, a lonely widow named Margaret takes a leap of dives into the world of online dating, sparking a whirlwind romance with a charming stranger named Evan. But as love begins to blossom, dark secrets emerge, thrusting her into a web of deception, isolation, and danger. As she watches the life she knew slip away, Margaret must navigate a treacherous path to find her way back to safety and rediscover the strength hidden within her. Will she escape the charm of a man who promises adventure but harbors a sinister truth? Prepare for a gripping tale of love, betrayal, and the quest for freedom in Into the Unknown. Margaret Lawson sat in her cozy living room, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, casting delicate patterns on the floor. 10 years had passed since her husband Tom had died, leaving her heart heavy with grief and solitude. The once vibrant life they shared slowly faded into quiet loneliness. After a decade of yearning for companionship, Margaret decided it was time to seek love again. She hesitated at first, unsure of the modern world of online dating, but the prospect of connecting with someone sparked a flicker of hope. With a deep breath, she created a profile on a dating site designed for mature singles. As she typed her information, she recalled the precious memories with Tom and hoped to forge new ones, filled with laughter and warmth. She carefully selected a profile picture, one where she smiled naturally, her silver hair framing her face softly. Days passed, and Margaret received messages from several men, but one stood out above the rest, Evan. His profile caught her eye. He was charming, funny, and shared many of her interests. They began messaging almost every day, exchanging thoughts, dreams, and stories of their lives. Their online conversations bloomed into a connection that rekindled a spark in Margaret's heart, and she found herself looking forward to each message. Evan lived across the country, but distance didn't deter either of them. They spoke on video calls, their laughter filling the empty room and reminding Margaret of the joy she once knew. As weeks turned into months, the special bond between them deepened, each shared word laying a new foundation for what Margaret hoped would be a lasting relationship. Eventually, however, Evan confessed that he wanted to come visit her. The news sent a thrilling shiver down her spine. When the day finally arrived, Margaret dressed with extra care, putting on her favorite blue dress and fixing her hair just right. She paced the living room, nerves dancing in her stomach as she imagined what it would be like to meet him in person. Evan arrived with a bouquet of her favorite flowers, a radiant smile on his face that made Margaret's heart skip a beat. Felt surreal, standing in front of the man who had brought joy back into her life after such a long time. They spent the weekend together, exploring the town, sharing laughter and stories over cozy dinners. Margaret felt alive again, wrapped in the warm embrace of love that had been missing for so long. As their connection deepened, Evan began to speak about dreams of adventure and a simpler life away from the bustle of society. He told Margaret that he had visions of living off the grid, embracing nature, and shedding the materialism that seemed to dominate modern life. He convinced her that they could create something beautiful together. All they needed was to be brave enough to leave it all behind. With every word, Margaret felt a thrill of excitement, but a flicker of doubt danced at the edges of her mind. She watched as Evan passionately spoke about breaking free from societal norms, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that perhaps he was rushing her into something too fast. As much as she loved the idea of escaping into the unknown, leaving her home, the last piece of her life with Tom, was daunting. After Evan left, Margaret pondered their future during quiet moments at home, thinking about how quickly things had changed. Ultimately, the exhilaration of love overshadowed her fears. They exchanged an unspoken promise to see each other again soon, and as Evan's truck pulled away, a part of her wished he would turn back, but he didn't. Weeks passed, and the days felt longer without Evan's presence. Margaret threw herself into her hobbies, but she found herself missing him more profoundly than she anticipated. She needed to feel his warmth, hear his laughter, and see the twinkle in his eyes when they talked about their dreams. So, she decided to reach out and they resumed their routine of nightly calls and text messages, bringing comfort to her lonely nights. Then one day, Evan suggested they take a big leap. He urged Margaret to sell her house and everything in it so they could start fresh together. It seemed like a thrilling adventure until the reality of what that meant hit her. This was the home she had shared with Tom, the walls filled with memories that had shaped her life. The thought of leaving it sent shivers down her spine, but Evan spoke with such conviction about discovering new horizons that Margaret found herself swept away by his enthusiasm. Cautiously, she began to consider the idea. After several more conversations, Margaret found herself drawn into Evan's grand vision. The excitement bubbled within her, slowly transforming into a powerful desire for change. One day, she took a leap and placed her house on the market, ready to welcome whatever the future held. Margaret's children, Daniel and Sophia, observed the rapid changes in their mother with a mix of worry and confusion. They loved their mother dearly, but struggled to understand her relationship with Evan. Daniel tried to voice his concerns, fearing that Margaret was moving too quickly, while Sophia supported her, hoping desperately that this new love would bring their mother happiness. Still, it was hard not to feel anxious about what was happening. One crisp morning, Margaret's house sold faster than she'd imagined. With tears in her eyes, she packed up memories of her life and let go of the home's embrace. The day she handed over the keys felt surreal, as though she was shedding a layer of herself, but with it came the thrill of a new beginning. Evan filled her mind with dreams of the mountains, far away from the worries of life, echoing promises of love and adventure. As the moving truck approached, Margaret noticed her daughter's apprehensive expressions but brushed off their concerns, convincing herself that they didn't understand the magic of love. Soon she was waving goodbye to her children, who stood with worried faces as she headed into the unknown with Evan, who promised her the world. The first weeks of their new life were an exploration. They drove through stunning landscapes, sharing everything from laughter to quiet moments under the evening sky. Yet, as time passed, Margaret noticed subtle changes in Evan's demeanor. The adventurous charm sometimes morphed into impatience, especially when Margaret hesitated to fully embrace all his ideas. As they settled into their new life, Evan frequently spoke of radical changes, encouraging Margaret to trust him. He spoke about a looming financial collapse and how the world was changing in alarming ways, creating a sense of urgency to remain off the grid. Eventually, those warnings seemed intertwined with his desire for control. Margaret began to feel like a passenger in the life they built, a reality she'd never anticipated. Her initial excitement dulled as she found herself increasingly isolated, feeling swallowed by the unknown. She missed her children's voices and the familiarity of her old life, realizing that love shouldn't blind her to fear and uncertainty. One day, feeling empowered, Margaret expressed her apprehensions. She needed stability and reassurance, even if that wasn't what Evan envisioned. Instead of understanding, he took her concerns lightly, dismissing them as irrational fears. As the conversation escalated, Margaret felt a chill that she hadn't felt before. There was an edge to Evan's voice that made her worry for her safety. They remained in an isolated cabin near the mountains, surrounded by dense forests. As the days turned into weeks without hearing from her family, a sense of dread crept in. One evening, while organizing their meager belongings, Margaret stumbled upon a small journal hidden in a drawer. As she read through its pages, a wave of anxiety washed over her. It contained alarming entries filled with bizarre conspiracy theories that spoke of government surveillance and impending chaos. The journal was not the writing of someone grounded in reality. "Margaret, why are you snooping?" Evan's voice cut through her preoccupied thoughts, startling her. The warmth in his smile had faded, replaced by something cold and watchful, and Margaret realized she had crossed an invisible line. Longing for clarity, she reached for her phone to call Sophia, but Evan's quick, deliberate movement snatched it away, his eyes darkening as he set it down. "We don't need them. This is our life now," he stated firmly, folding his arms as he spoke. The tension thickened in the air, and Margaret felt trapped. In that moment, something shifted within her. The man who had come to her with promises of love had now become a source of fear. Margaret had to escape, but doing so would not be easy. She knew deep down that she must find a way to reconnect with her children, to signal for help. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret stifled her growing panic, but she felt the walls of isolation closing in. Every time she tried to talk to Evan about her feelings, he dismissed her as being influenced by the world outside. As a result, she slowly began to feel powerless. She longed for freedom, but feared what Evan might do if he discovered her intentions. One morning, while Evan was out scavenging for supplies, Margaret slipped into his room and quickly rifled through his belongings. Her heart raced as she searched for anything that would confirm her suspicions. Her breath caught when her fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper in his bedside drawer. It detailed victims of fraud and missing women, each name striking a chill in her bones. In a daze, she set the note aside and focused on an escape plan. Margaret had to reach out to her children, but how? Time was running out. The next night, after much deliberation, she decided to take a chance. While Evan prepared dinner, she quietly slipped out into the dark woods. Trying to avoid making any noise, heart pounding, she pushed through the trees until she found a clearing. With trembling hands, she dialed the familiar numbers, praying for a connection. Sophia answered, and panic filled Margaret's heart as she quickly explained everything, how Evan had changed and what she had discovered. "We need help, Mom. Where are you?" Sophia's voice was filled with urgency. Margaret could hear concern lacing the words as they tried to establish a plan. The moment she hung up, relief washed over her, but she knew she couldn't remain outside for long. As she returned to the cabin, dread pooled in her stomach. Where was Evan? What if he knew she had tried to escape? Days went by as Margaret waited anxiously for her children to arrive. She watched the skies flicker with unease, knowing she couldn't trust Evan anymore. After a few nights, fear morphed into a simmering panic. Every rustle of leaves made her feel as if someone was watching her. Then, one afternoon, just as all hope began to wane, a figure emerged at the edge of the clearing. Margaret's heart raced as she recognized the familiar silhouette of Daniel. He was there, standing firm with determination etched on his face. Relief flooded her as she ran into his arms. Sophia soon arrived, and the three of them clutched each other tightly, tears of joy streaming down Margaret's cheeks. "There's no time to waste. We need to leave right now," Daniel urged, glancing nervously at the cabin. With renewed strength, they quickly gathered what little they could, preparing to make their escape before Evan returned. As they headed towards safety, the haunting realization of what had happened sunk in deeper. Margaret couldn't shake the overwhelming feelings of fear, betrayal, and guilt for leaving Tom's memory behind. She had been searching for love, but what she found was far from what she had envisioned. Suddenly, a distant shout broke the stillness. "Margaret!" It was Evan, his voice echoing through the trees and slicing through her heart. The fear surged back, and they quickened their pace, aware that time was running out. With each hurried step, Margaret's heart raced. She didn't look back as they fled deeper into the woods, the haunting shadows of doubt trailing behind her. The thrill of freedom mixed with fear drove her forward, reminding her that they weren't just escaping a relationship. They were saving her life. Finally, after what felt like hours, they arrived at a neighbor's house where they collapsed, breathless and shaken. They quickly explained their situation, and the neighbors offered support, calling the authorities on their behalf. Relief washed over Margaret as she finally felt safe and surrounded by those who cared for her. Hours later, as the sun began to set, police arrived at the neighbor's house, taking her statement. Guilt mingled with gratitude as Margaret watched them leave to search for Evan. She had defied her own heart's longing for love, but found herself safer with her children. Love could be beautiful, but could also hide darkness she had never anticipated. Several days later, they received news that Evan had been found in the woods, living alone and isolated. He had made choices that put him on the wrong side of the law, and authorities connected him to several past cases involving missing women. The realization sent chills down Margaret's spine. With each passing day, Margaret began to heal, rebuilding her life with the support of her family. She reconnected with friends and immersed herself in community activities, slowly regaining the sense of belonging she had once lost. It was a long journey, but she was determined to embrace her new beginning. As the months passed, Margaret found solace in knowing that love didn't always come in the form of romance. Sometimes it came from those who stood by her through thick and thin: her children, friends, and newfound community connections. One day, while walking through the park, she spotted a group of older adults laughing and chatting. Summoning her courage, she decided to join them, realizing that connections could blossom anew, and friendship could fill the void left behind. Margaret had taken a chance on love, and while it had led her to dark places, it also showed her the light of resilience and hope. She found strength in her story and a renewed determination to embrace life, love, and every moment that lay ahead. Though her journey was fraught with challenges, she was ready to face whatever the future held. This time, with her eyes wide open and her heart guarded yet hopeful.